Thank you, Laura. So good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see everybody's faces. This is a bigger group than what was in the May group, small groups, and so I'm a little intimidated now. I'm just kidding. So my name is Laura Dixon. I practice here in Hamilton. So as Andrew, our esteemed president, who is not going anywhere, even though I'm the VP, he's got to stay around. Welcome to Hamilton. We're very pleased to welcome everybody down. And with me, of course, is Nicole. And we've been asked to speak to you about keeping talent in a value-driven era, how to advertise, I guess, yourself to value talent, as well as how to retain that talent. As you may or may not know, I don't know if anybody's currently or recently gone through the hiring process. It is definitely a seller's market out there. There is a lot of people looking for staff, but I'm not going to say not a lot of good staff out there. That sounds terrible, and don't pass that on to them. But there's not necessarily the number of applicants that we've seen in the past. So those of us who have looked for staff in the last maybe 2-3 years have probably found it very difficult, and I'm seeing a lot of nodding of heads, to find good quality candidates that will not only supplement your own current team, but perhaps develop that team and make it a better team all around. So, Nicole and I have been asked to speak to you about that. We, of course, welcome any comments, questions, considerations you might have. We don't endeavour as the typical lawyer to cover absolutely everything. So we do look to you folks out there as well for your thoughts. So the first kind of area that I wanted to really look at was where to start. And the first thing I would suggest is, right from the hiring process and identifying good talent and valued talent. And how do you go about attracting those to your firms, whether you're small, solo, or even a larger firm? What do you have to consider as a hiring individual or a hiring firm? And really the question you have to ask is what value can you offer to the applicant? Not only are you looking obviously at their credentials and what they can bring to your team, but what can you offer to that individual? As I mentioned, it's a very competitive market out there. So you have to think, I believe, beyond salary. And I think we heard from Eldon as well this afternoon that, yes, salary is obviously important. Many of us are, if not all of us, are feeling the pinch these days. So salary, of course, is important. However, other aspects such as benefits. What kind of benefit package can you offer an individual? Obviously, the better a package, the more attractive it might be. The lesser of the package, perhaps not. There are so many, like I said, jobs out there being advertised. And what I'm seeing too is that not a lot of this information is being put into the job ads. So that may not attract a specific great candidate for your firm. So I encourage anybody to put in there the salary considerations, as well as if there's a benefit package, using the words like competitive benefit package sometimes is an attractive piece as well. But being upfront with folks who contact you to say, what are you talking about? What benefits? What type of salary? But also think about what your company can provide. What type of engagement do you provide to that individual? Do you foster and promote a positive work culture? That comes from not only just the hiring process, but your firm overall. Those of us in the Hamilton market, for the most part, know each other. It's a big bar, but a small bar. So those of us I know, for example, Andrew's firm's a great firm to go work with, and I would happily refer, says Andrew, a terrible firm, just kidding. I have. My former assistant has now gone to work with Andrew because I could not, when I started my own firm at the beginning of this year, could not take on a full-time staff member, and said to her, if you're ever looking, I know Andrew might be looking, and it's worked out, from what I understand, Andrew, you haven't told me otherwise, very well for them. But that kind of fostering that positive identification and identity out there amongst your peers will hopefully help drive value talent to you. Consider that hiring is much different than what it was 10 to 15 years ago. Maybe even longer than that. I mean, I'm thinking of 30, 40 years ago in Hamilton, there was, I think, 6 female lawyers. Obviously, it's become much different now in 2024. There's a lot more of us, yay. But even with our staff, there's it's much different. We're seeing a much different quality of candidates from everybody from Canadian trained to internationally trained, and it really should come down to their credentials, obviously, but also their fit within your work culture as well. And an interview process, obviously, is important for that. So I encourage, if you get a CV or a resume in from someone, don't just take it on the face value. Encourage a conversation with that individual, whether you start with a phone call or whether you start with a Zoom conversation. Meet that person, get to know that person, get a feel for that. I will call out Alan right now. He's not here. So is he? Oh, I thought he was here, but he's not here. 13 years ago when I interviewed with Alan Wine-Prawl, who's on the FOLA board as his articling student, he interviewed me 4 times. That was 3 times for me too many, but he interviewed me 4 times. But I think that we then figured out that we were a good fit at that time for certainly my articles at that time. And then lo and behold, here I am 13 years later practicing in association with him. So, I mean, he didn't have a choice. I was coming back to work with him, but I had to go out and do obviously my own thing and come back. But for him, that was important. We had to make sure our small firm's work environment aligned. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, Nicole. If you want to jump in, please feel free. Consider flexibility, and I think somebody spoke about that earlier as well. With COVID and even before, work from home models, hybrid models are the in thing. And I encourage everybody to consider allowing staff or associates to have that flexibility. We are no longer in a 9 to 5, well, maybe we never had that in the first place as lawyers, but we're not that type of culture anymore. At least we shouldn't be. We should allow the flexibility for ourselves as a better work-life integration. It's not a balance, but it's an integration, so that each of us, as well as our staff, can feel like they can have a morning off perhaps, or not feel like they can't ask for some time off to go to their kids' assembly or, a doctor's appointment or whatever that might be important to them. So that's something that Alan and I foster at our firm. Even myself, I come in maybe 2-3 days a week. I work from home those other couple of days. And it allows me that flexibility. I mean, I know they're my own boss, but it allows me that flexibility. My kids are young, they're 10 and 8. Monday I'll go to the Remembrance Assembly at their school. The afternoon I'll do some work. Maybe I'll have some activities in the evening. I'll do a little bit of work in the evening. I think that's important to staff as well. And if you're concerned about the work product, you can ask perhaps them to dock it or provide a summary of what they've done. I have a full-time remote assistant, so my assistant does not work in my office whatsoever. She said to me, I have little kids. I want to be able to get them to school and I want to get them home from school. And I said, I don't care. As long as the work gets done, please, feel free to flex your hours however you wish to do that. And so far, it's working really well for us. She's a fantastic assistant, so I'm not going to tell you her name because I don't want you to steal her. But she's great. She works remote. We operate by teams. If we need to, we'll do a Zoom call or Teams call. And so that's really again, beyond the salary, what other options can you offer to provide a value, your valued talent, value to your firm? Consider a hiring process that has to be built for inclusivity. Consider that, even if you don't hire a specific candidate, you want to be known as a firm who considers equity, diversity, and inclusion within your firm. I've seen some models where you're asking for resumes without perhaps names or identifiers, so that you're not subconsciously skewed to not hiring an individual with a specific type of name, or perhaps you are looking for somebody of a diverse nature. Make sure that's identified then in your advert, that you would prefer somebody of a certain background. Perhaps you've got a clientele that needs a certain language spoken. Make sure you're promoting your firm as an inclusive firm for all. Think about more long-term than short-term. Again, like I mentioned, it's not all about salaries or the $500 benefits that they might get. It is all about ensuring that both you, your company, and the individual feel respected, feel heard, and have the opportunities to grow together. Nicole, I'm going to pass it over to you. Does anybody have any questions about the hiring process before I pass it over to Nicole? Yes?
I actually just have a question about your remote assistant.
Yeah. Nope.
More importantly, how do you, I struggle with trying to imagine more of a work from home and remote assistance and things like that, because I still have a very largely paper-based business. are you doing that? Is there a different person or a more junior clerk who's doing those things to send them or to upload them into the system for your remote clerk to be able to access that information?
Right. I'm just going to try to rephrase your question or say your question for the purposes of our lovely video audience. So the question was asked, if you've got a remote staff, how do you coordinate with paper-based documents? Is that fair to say? So I'm lucky that my practice is predominantly scanned documents anyway. I don't get a lot of mail. In fact, the days I get emails from our receptionist, who is in the office most days, no mail today. I'm like, this is fantastic, because everything comes by email. I'm kind of moving more to that system, but we do have a receptionist that works and will scan the mail. The other option is that you can maybe pool resources with another firm and perhaps have a separate assistant or a receptionist who does that for you. Or when I started out at the beginning of the year, I didn't have an assistant, so I did that all by myself. I know that's a lot to ask many of us to do, but that's how I found. I don't really know how, other than to say, yeah, you need obviously an individual who does that if there's paper-based, but certainly maybe even moving to asking your clients, can you provide that to me electronically, or to doctors who I have a civil litigation practice and do personal injury for the most part. I ask doctors to now send me their documents by email or by Dropbox or OneDrive or whatever it might be. I also ask clients to send me their MyChart login. I can log into their MyChart with their permission or their consent. But yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about the physical scanning of things, and I don't think we're quite moving away from that yet. Another option could be having a desktop scanner for your remote assistant, so that if something comes in and then you can get it out to her. I'm not sure, obviously, that it'll be specific to each one. But for me, anyway, personally, I have a receptionist who does that, sends it by email to me and my assistant, and then everything's digital. We keep very little paper in our office. We keep only the necessities, I'll say, like the authorizations that have to be on their own. Any other questions? Hopefully that answered your question. Not really. That's a typical lawyer response. Sorry. Okay. Nicole.
Thanks, Laura. So I'm Nicole Symes. I have my own law firm, Symes Law, Quelle Surprise. And I opened it last year. I have 3 associates and a law clerk and an office manager. And I practice exclusively employment law. So I have sort of an interesting perspective on the employee relations side of things. I represent a number of law firms and lawyers, obviously not for those firms, but see the good and the bad. And so Laura just gave us a great overview of sort of how to present your value add to candidates and what you're looking for. And then I thought we could dig into some of those issues on the keeping talent. So once you've got them in the door, what are some of the unique things to set you apart to keep them in your firm if you've found someone good? And I think one of the key first places to start is what Laura said on flexibility. So we're technically hybrid, but really that means someone's coming into one of our offices once a week at most, and it's more about sort of seeing each other than really operating a physical presence, although we're seeing clients every now and then in person. But that flexibility has been very important to the associates and staff. There's been a very significant interest in the work from home, and so far it's been quite seamless for us. It's certainly with lawyers, we docket, our practice is completely docketed time, so it's very easy to see output. And with the staff, we're so busy you can tell when people are getting the work done or not. So it's worked very well for us. Things to think about beyond just working from home. From an employment law perspective, if you're allowing remote work, are you setting boundaries either in employment contracts or policies around where that remote work happens? Is it work from home? Is it work from the cottage? Is it work from Mexico? What does that look like? And for how much time? Because there are certainly employment law considerations, but also tax and health law and the rest if they're spending a significant amount of time in another country. So keeping some boundaries on they have to have your consent to where they work. But some of that flexibility can be a real bonus that doesn't cost you anything more. So in our Toronto office, we operate out of a shared office, and it has locations all over the world. So I've had an associate that went and worked from LA for 2 weeks, and she did work. She was working every single day. She was available on Toronto time zone, but she then got to benefit from seeing people that she wanted to see in LA. So some of those considerations of can you work elsewhere and for how much time? And then certainly looking at the flexibility piece, like Laura mentioned, around child care, elder care. Do you really need people to be 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 8 to 6 or whatever it is, and can you give those spaces for time away from work as long as they're getting the work done at another time? And especially with children, that's how it is. I mean, I have 2 kids, 3 and 5. That's my life right now, and I'm the boss, so it works for me. But I'm open to, you have to leave at 4:30 and then you're going to come back on at 8. That works for us. And so thinking about flexibility on, do you even need them to be in the office or online at certain times? And sometimes you do, of course. There's clients that need to see people during the day, but there's lots of room around the edge to allow for flexibility to make a workplace that works for people's lives. And Laura touched on it, but there's sort of a discussion out there about work-life balance versus work-life fit, and how balance suggests that those two, work and personal life, are always in conflict, and you have to try to make them balance, as opposed to work-life fit, recognizing that work is an integral part of people's lives, and trying to make it sort of work together with personal priorities, personal needs, and finding something that works. That's a lot of work. Maybe I'll let Laura see if you wanted to comment on flexibility at all.
Yeah, I can.
If you like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so just in terms of flexibility, I did work, and obviously not name names, but I worked in a past life with an older gentleman whose life was pretty much just work, right? He came from that older mentality of, the wife's at home looking after the kids, bringing up the kids, and work was basically his life. So he didn't have that work-life balance or work-life fit. He didn't have either of them. It was work, and that was it. And so in his mind, because I came in at 9:30 and I left at 4:15, I was a part-timer. And I didn't take a lunch. And I would, say, I'm here. And I just wasn't her, because I wasn't in at 7 in the morning when he was, and I wasn't there till 7 at night. And, and I see a lot of that happen across our profession. And my hope is that as more and more of us speak of this, and more of us kind of are coming through that, we'll see a change. I don't think that maybe some bigger centers are seeing that change, or even smaller centers like Hamilton. And so make sure that I would really recommend that you keep that in mind, that we try to filter out that mentality. Actually, appreciate what your individuals are doing. I mean, for me, when I worked with that individual many moons ago, I was at one point billing more than him. So it was, but it wasn't, maybe he knew that, maybe at the end of the year he could see that, but just that day-to-day grind, that wasn't being recognized. And so that really came through with, I wasn't getting maybe some of the assignments that my cohorts were getting, or I wasn't getting invited out to lunch with that client at that time, because maybe she's got to be home for the kids, or she can't stay beyond a certain time. My kids were very little at the time, which understandably, and that time I was thinking, oh, that's nice of him. He's given me that balance. But really looking back, look at my peers, and I think, well, that person was a couple of years behind me coming up, and he was getting more opportunities than I was. And so for me, it's really important in my practice is to see the output, and to understand and appreciate that, yes, okay, I was there at 9:30 and I left at 4:15, but I was doing the job. And so I want to make sure that I'm passing that on to my staff, and I don't have an associate and be hiring, would like to, or need to be hired, please call me. But for my staff and for my peers to be able to understand that flexibility is important to me, and I hope it's important, and I would hope that I can share that, I guess, with another individual. So then moving on, or does anybody have any questions, I guess, about flexibility? Yes.
No, I think it's just a comment. I really like the employment law comments about limiting where they can work. That's something we really take over. At least I can't think. We run a solicitor's practice mainly. It's difficult for us. We did have some success. Somebody moved out of town, and we said we can work remote. They were moved out of town, but other people said, well, I want to work remote too. I want to work, and where's the stuff? So we really struggled with it. I don't know if there's an answer or not, or a comment about where do you stop? Because we kind of need people in the office because we're paper based, really. And, I don't know. You guys are litigators, right?
For the most part, yes. Yeah.
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 It's a lot different. It's staff driven. You need to talk to them. You need to see them, and so it may be easier for you guys, a little bit more difficult for people who run a solicitor's practice, or sole practitioners.
Yeah, so just for the video, the comment was, when you're dealing with a paper-based practice or a solicitor-based practice, you perhaps need more individuals in your firm as opposed to where we're trying to sell the remote world and the remote way of living. And I appreciate that. And, it really comes down to, each, again, another lawyer talk, each individual set of facts are going to be different, right? And, I think from an employment perspective, Nicole does much more employment law than I do, but each of your employment contracts for each of your staff members is individual, right? Doesn't have to be blanket. I appreciate the perception might be, Sally is getting 4 days at home versus Jake, who's only getting 2 days at home, but it really comes down to a conversation and, again, that value add and keeping that talent that you have. If you value Jake's input and you think, yes, I'd rather him in the office, but you can come up with some kind of agreement with him on the flexibility that he or she requires, then maybe that's something as an employer we have to consider and say, well, I'd rather have Jake still work for me than lose that talent and then have to find somebody to replace them and train and all that jazz, right? I don't know. I think it comes down to each specific set of facts, but yes, Andrew.
Just some commentary on that, in that I agree with you. So, as you know, your old assistant works with...
We'll take complaints later, thanks. No, I'm kidding.
Working out wonderfully, and thank you so much for the introduction. So my comment would be, when you're going through the interview process, it depends on what you want, right? So I'm a litigator. I practice state litigation, but I like being in the office, and I like my staff being in the office. So when I was interviewing people, that was a question that I asked them, what's your preference? Is your preference to work at home? Because if it is, it might not be the best candidate for me, and I'm just upfront with that. I like people being in the office, and I'm okay if you need to come in late because you want to see the assembly or the performance at school, or leave early if you can pick up kids from school or whatever it is. Happy to do that. I got to do that myself. So no problem. But for the most part, I like you to be in the office and just being up front with your candidates. I think at the outset is super important. Managing expectations. It changes, right? So at Tigers of Zero, we're one of the medium-sized firms here in Hamilton. We have an associate who works in North Bay, I think, full-time from home. It works for her, and she does strictly solicitor practice. And so she manages her staff remotely from North Bay, but it works for her practice. I haven't seen her in 2 weeks. Anyways, I think it comes down to what we were saying before, the interview process, managing expectations, being upfront with expectations, and of course being flexible in terms of personal circumstances. Both ways.
Yeah, but I have a clerk now who's just started for me, and her preference was to work from home. My preference is for her to be in the office. And so our compromise is, because she has to commute, so she comes in at 7 and she leaves at 1. She's got a horse that she has to go take care of mid-afternoon. And so then once she's done that, she logs back on. And, I tend to handwrite a lot of stuff. I'm old.
I think that's the second time you've said that today, Laura. You're not.
If I handwrite something, I
It's a juggling act. It's another juggling act that we have to do with employees. That sometimes makes it easier, but sometimes creates some problems. And I get your point. Just finding the balance, right?
Yeah, so just for our video watchers, thanks for not being here, but that's fine. No, I'm just saying for the comments that were being given and maybe you didn't hear is really that balancing act and what do you do with an individual who wants to work from home and then somebody else who says not. And I think taking Andrew's point is really being upfront in the interview process. Again, poor Leslie's getting thrown out here, but when I interviewed with Leslie, she wanted to be in the office. And so it's a great fit with her and Andrew. He's in the office, she wants to be in the office. For me, I said to her, I don't need you to be in the office now. And so it fit for her. But yeah, being upfront with the candidate. And it really depends, right? Again, you have to ask yourself short-term versus long-term too. If short-term, you'd prefer them to be in the office, but long-term, this is a candidate that's really going to bring so much value to your firm, either in terms of work product or, work culture or positivity and developing your brand, then I think there's got to be a bit of a trade-off, and I hear you, and I appreciate that it's tricky, but yeah, and each contract can be different, right? And the only other thing I wanted to say about the working from abroad thing, and I don't know, and obviously Dan's not in here, but check the Law Pro policy to see how many days you're allowed to work outside of the country, because that was something that somebody's like, oh, this lawyer's working full-time in wherever, Mexico, Timbuktu, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if Law Pro would cover you if you're in Mexico 12 months of the year and you're practicing in Ontario. So that's my little asterisk, check the Law Pro policy before you allow somebody to work full-time in Mexico. Yes?
I have a small practice. It was completely virtual from the pandemic up until recently. And so I was just wondering, the conversation we're having is like these considerations that I've not really thought of. Is there a type of liability that we take on by allowing staff to work from home? Like, is there something that we should be including in the employment contracts to say, like, if you fall down the stairs in your own house, it's not my problem?
I like that. Waivers of all contracts of employment. I'm going to pass that over to Nicole because she's got much more experience on that. So the question was, is there a liability as a lawyer in allowing your staff to work from home? Is that a fair? Okay.
So this is not legal advice.
That's why I passed it over to Nicole.
But the Occupational Health and Safety Act would consider the home to be a workplace if they work from home. So you do need to make sure they don't trip over their own cords and things of that nature. Are you going to go and do an inspection? Probably not. But it has been updated and it does recognize that that's the workplace. So yeah, it is a new consideration, and there are risks in the home that you can't control. So it is interesting in that sense. Yeah. We're almost getting close to the end of time. So I wanted to go back and touch on something that Laura mentioned in the sort of thinking about gaining talent and acquiring talent for the firm, in keeping them looking at sort of what is the culture of the firm and thinking about our diverse workplaces and inclusion and how to make that a reality instead of just checking the box for the CPD requirements, right? And I certainly have a diverse workforce, and I think recognizing it is the first place to start. For our firm, a friend of mine is a professor at UBC, and she makes all her students do a positionality statement as their first assignment, and that's a recognition of sort of who they are in the world and how that affects how they see everything, how they're going to approach the course, how they're going to approach every issue that comes up. And we did that as an exercise at the firm. So how does where we stand in the world, our gender, race, background, history, how do we come to law, everything. How does that affect how we interact with each other, our clients, opposing counsel, whatever it might be. And it was a very interesting exercise. It was very helpful to get to know each other, but also to sort of understand that background. And that was great. And then sort of building on that, the true recognition of what it is to have an equal workplace. So I have an employee who is Muslim, and so I give her paid holidays for those days off for Eid, because she doesn't need the Christmas holidays, although of course she still takes them as stat holidays, but that's just a recognition of something that's important to her, and that is not a lot to ask of me, but really sends the message that this is a workplace that is inclusive and recognizes the diversity. And with law firm clients that I have or lawyers that I've represented, I've certainly seen the opposite of that, right? So not scheduling important law firm committee meetings on high holidays, right? Don't do that. And just taking that little extra step to make sure that the people that work for you are recognized and that they're not excluded in that way can really make quite a difference. And I know in the last 5 years, we've talked a lot about sexual harassment in the workplace. Unfortunately, it's still rampant. So I also have law firm clients where they're constantly dealing with that as well. And I think the messaging is always, this starts from the top. So if sort of the law firm execs, owners, whoever it is that create policy and create expectations are setting the right message, then that's the trickle down to everyone, whether it's associates and staff. It really makes a difference if the top of the law firm is doing things right. And you can't control everything, so then appreciating that when the issues come up, dealing with them in the correct way legally, but also in the most sensitive way to make sure that the people feel recognized and understood, that can go a long way to keeping the talent even when those difficult issues come up. And then one of the other sort of things that we wanted to touch on was about encouraging connection within the law firm. Because we're hybrid but practically remote, we have, social events quarterly where we get together. We're going on a firm retreat with the lawyers and staff because we're a small firm, so we work so closely together. I try to encourage people to come into the office, if nothing more than to see each other and build those personal relationships, because they can do their work very well from home because everything we have, all our tech allows for that. We don't have the concern around the paper issue, but it creates a much different environment when they have that connection to each other and to me, so that's been really important for me as well. And I thought I would pause there. We had a few other thoughts, but we're almost at time to see if there were any other questions, comments, helpful tips that someone else has for us.
Well, I think it's a great comment again about the sexual harassment stuff. Our firm is very good, but I've talked to some people, and I know some people in this room that have a very casual relationship with their staff. And I say to them, it's okay. It might work for you, but remember, some of these staff members might not be your friends in 4 years and might have something against you, and they're going to come after you. There's another reason, right, not to have those kind of conversations. I used to be bad in my 20 years ago. It's the way I was brought up, I guess. I was stupid. But I realized that, to your point, the lead from the top, it filters down, and you can still have a lot of fun without making certain comments and taking things down a certain way. So I only make that comment because you brought it up, but I think it's really, really important for a lot of people to.
Yeah, for the video, so to sum it up, things have changed. And I think that's absolutely true. It's true legally, right? So I practice as part of employment law, human rights, and sexual harassment comes up all the time. And the law has changed, and culture within all sorts of businesses, not just law firm, has changed even in the last 6-7 years, let alone 12, 13, or 20 years. And so I think just recognizing that what we did 12 years ago isn't necessarily what we can do today without there being consequence or without that sending a message that maybe isn't the message that you want anymore. And I think you can still have, as you said, a fun, lighthearted law firm where people are getting along and having a nice time without the jokes or the liability, really.
We had one more question in the back.
Back to the work remote issue. We're in a firm of about 40 lawyers, and I would say about half of them are juniors. And we got used to, from COVID, to work from home. Now what we're starting to see is that work from home, you're not getting mentored. Like, we're starting to see a gap. Like, there's already a gap because they haven't had any a lot of import experience. But now we're starting to see, I'm old school.
Yeah.
How do you get past that when you're working remote a lot?
So the question is, how do we do the mentoring and the teaching when there's so much remote work? And I think it's true. I mean, I certainly saw with articling students that when they come in person more, there's just a lot more of the sort of osmosis learning, right? From just being there. Absolutely, I think that is part of it. We use Google Chat, and I'm on it all day long. So I kind of have an open door policy in that sense that I get messages about everything all day long. And lots of calls. We do lots of video calls between, we do like a lawyer's call only every single week, and then on many other sort of files. So trying to keep the same elements of you can come to me anytime and talk it through. But I think there is a reality to that there's something that does get missed, but they're getting the work done, and it just means it's a little slower to learn all the pieces that maybe could have been a bit faster in the past. And maybe I'll turn that to Laura to answer that piece, and then we're probably...
Yeah, I don't have much more other than that to add. I mean, I think we are seeing that, and certainly our Hamilton bench is encouraging us to come back into the courtrooms. And any opportunity I can have to stick my robes on and go back to court, I am taking, and I'm a 12-year call. So, and I'm certainly telling, and I sit on our new lawyers subcommittee, and I tell them all the time, please come out, come out, come out. Obviously, I can't force them. I'm not their employer, but I mean, that's something you can consider going forward if you want to have somebody in 1 day a week, put that into their contract, be upfront with them, like Andrew said. In the current with your current employees, making that appointment in their calendar so they can't move it, right? Like we're meeting at 11 a.m. on Friday morning or 10 a.m. on Friday morning, on Zoom or Teams or Google, whatever platform you choose to use, and having that face-to-face. I use Teams with my assistant. I don't have an associate, obviously, or an articling student, but having that open door policy has always been key to me too. So you can do that remotely. It's a little bit different, but I hear you and I understand that. And so let's encourage all our younger kids to come out to the courtrooms again, to get to social events if your local associations have social events, because it's so important for them to know and see the other lawyers that are in their area, because otherwise we're going to lose that connection piece that we used to have, I'll say. So thank you, everybody. Nicole and I are happy to take any questions afterwards, but I think we were going to move on to our next breakout room. So thank you, everybody. Nice to see everybody, and have a good afternoon.